Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a battle of the ages. Ford versus Chevy. 427 Ford, 4¼ horse. 427 Chevy, 4¼ horse. What makes these engines different? What makes them very similar? We're going to take a look at that today. The 427 425 horsepower Ford and the 427 425 horsepower Chevrolet engines shared many similarities. Both had a similar bore and stroke sizes. The Ford had a 4.23 bore with a 3.78 stroke, and the Chevrolet had a 4.25 bore with a 3.76 stroke, almost identical. Both engines had forged steel crankshafts and the best connecting rods offered at the time by each manufacturer. Looking at the engine blocks themselves, the Ford offered cross-bolt main caps on the 3 center main journals, and the Chevrolet offered 4-bolt main caps on all 5 main journals. You can debate the positives and negatives associated with both, so in my opinion, I would consider them both equally as strong. They also shared roughly the same compression ratio of around 11:1, and both engines used forged dome pistons. Both engines had solid lifter cams with similar specs. The Ford had 0.525 lift with a 324 duration, and the Chevrolet had a 0.520 lift with a 336 duration. I think I'd call that a draw. Looking at the cylinder heads, we see more similarities. Both the 427 Ford and Chevrolet engines shared the 219 intake valves, but the Chevrolet had a 172 exhaust valve compared to the Ford, which had a 1.73 exhaust valve. Again, my opinion, another draw.
We may not have an agreement today. We probably won't.
The differences start to become more obvious from there. The 427 Ford was a wedge-style head with an inline valve arrangement, whereas the 427 Chevrolet used a cannon valve arrangement, which did offer superior flow in comparison. Also, the Chevrolet had rocker arms with a 1.70 ratio, and the Ford had ones with a 1.76 ratio. The advantage does go to Ford, but in all honesty, it was a very little consequence, as the flow characteristics of the 427 cannon valve heads far outweighed the better rocker arm ratio held by the Ford engine. Clear win for the Chevrolet.
Oh, interesting. Continue.
Moving to the induction system, the 427 Chevrolet had only a single 780 CFM 4150 Holley carburetor mounted to a dual plane intake. The Ford 427 had twin 710 CFM Holley 4160 carburetors and a dual plane 2.4 intake. Here the obvious edge goes to the Ford engine. On the exhaust side, both had free-flowing exhaust manifolds, but again the edge goes to Ford for having longer tube-style cast-iron manifolds. However, with how restrictive the 427 Ford exhaust port was, the manifolds probably did very little to help that problem. More than likely, no clear performance advantage can be given to the 427 Ford for having such a great exhaust manifold due to the poor port restrictions. Although there are differences, looking at the two engines on paper, you would say they are equal in comparison, with a slight advantage going to the Chevrolet because of the cylinder head design. Let's take a look at where the rubber meets the road with performance testing of these engines in the actual cars they came in from magazine articles of the day. In 1966, Hot Rod Magazine tested a 427 425 horse 1966 full-size Chevy Caprice and got the car to run 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds and a quarter-mile time of 16.3 at 88 miles an hour. Similarly, Car Life magazine tested a 427 425 horsepower 66 Ford Galaxy on the quarter mile, and it ran 15.3 with no mile per hour recorded. I do find the differences in time slips questionable, As the car's weights were comparable, but with very limited data available, I have to trust them as being correct. The 1966 Corvette with the 427, 425 horsepower engine was also tested by Hot Rod Magazine. The car ran 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds with a quarter-mile time of 13.4 at 105 miles an hour. In 1966, there were two other Ford cars that came equipped with their 427, 425 horse engine, the 1966 Fairlane 500 and the 427 Cobra. It should be noted that these both were limited production vehicles, with only 57 Fairlanes and 348 Cobras built with those engines. The 1966 427 powered Fairlane, as tested by Hot Rod Magazine in stock trim, ran a 14.5 at 100 miles an hour. The 427 Cobra, as tested by Car and Driver, ran 0 to 60 in 4.3 seconds and a quarter mile in 12.2 seconds at 118 miles an hour. Some may look at these comparisons and say it isn't exactly fair, especially throwing in 427 Cobra in the mix, and they would be right. If you look at the power to weight ratios of the Corvette versus the Cobra, you can see the distinct advantage of the Cobra being that it weighs nearly 1,000 pounds less. Unfortunately, it looks like we now have more questions than answers. Will there ever be a clear-cut winner? On paper, the 427 Chevrolet engine seems to have an advantage over the Ford. On the track, the 427 Ford engine seems to have the advantage over the Chevrolet. So is the Ford the winner or the Chevrolet? Ford or Chevy? Ford or Chevy? Ford or Chevy? People will never agree which engine's better. And I don't know if you can clearly say if there is a better engine. They're both good at what they do. But what I will say is that from Detroit, at the time these engines were put out, these were the best of the best. 425 horsepower, 425 horsepower. How each one got there doesn't really matter. They both made excellent power. We'll continue to argue about it, and it's going to be good fun. Ford's better, Chevy's better. It's fun. But no doubt about it, they both were pretty awesome. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.